Welcome, everybody. I see folks joining. Thank you for joining us. I am Meg Mara with Borshoff. I help to lead Borshoff's employee engagement and communications practice group, and I'm going to be moderating our discussion this morning. So we have a few housekeeping or logistics notes before I introduce Rebecca, who's going to help lead our discussion today. And those are, again, thank you for joining us virtually, everybody. First, we hope that you are all healthy and safe. And we really wish that we were seeing you in person in our space in downtown Indy, but this virtual format allows us to connect with some others. And also, you know, we're doing the best we can with this virtual format. So thank you for joining. And a couple of notes on this virtual format. I'm sure we are all getting really good at using Zoom meetings, right? But you did join muted, but we hope that this discussion will be interactive. So if you want to share thoughts, questions for Rebecca, observations, etc., please feel free to use the chat function to do that, and we'll be sharing some links in the chat as well. Or please feel free to use the raise your hand feature, and then Megan will call on you in the order that those pop up as we go through today's discussion. So I want to introduce our discussion leader today, Rebecca Ellis. We are really fortunate to be joined by Rebecca. She has recently joined the Performance Lab with nearly 20 years experience in learning, organization, development, and change. She is passionate about discovering opportunities to maximize human potential to deliver customer-centric solutions. And as managing director of the Performance Lab, Rebecca's role is to provide strategic guidance to clients who desire to build a high-performance culture with a strategic plan to support it. She has her Ph.D. in organizational development from Benedictine University, and she is also a certified change management professional. So welcome again, Rebecca. I think that we have a great relevant discussion today about things that I am sure are all on our minds. And I know, you know, at least this group, when we're in person, we very much appreciate hearing the perspective and experiences of our peers. So I know that will play out in our discussion today as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Meg, for inviting me. I'm excited to be here this morning.
Okay, well, to get us started, I wanted to talk about, and I think, you know, gathering this group at this time would be impossible and perhaps even just completely irrelevant not to talk about, you know, things in the current environment. So first kind of topic and question that I'm hoping to get your perspective on, Rebecca, and everybody else's observations is, so I saw a very interesting perspective last week on CNBC by Mark Cuban, so the billionaire entrepreneur Mark Cuban, and he was on Closing Bell. And, you know, regardless of whether you align with Mark Cuban politically or not, I thought his outlook was really interesting, and we will share this full article in the chat if people want to check it out. But Mark Cuban shared the opinion that, you know, despite the current very acute economic turmoil that we're experiencing with coronavirus, that ultimately his opinion is that this is going to end up improving capitalism, right? For the effect that it is having on businesses' behavior and corporate decision-making in this kind of more compassionate, human-forward way. You know, we are seeing companies really put employees first, and his thinking is that this is going to have a lasting positive impact. So I think that this particular subject is especially interesting to this group of internal communicators because it speaks to this underlying insight that we have all known and been operating, you know, by for years, and what drives a lot of what you do, Rebecca, at the Performance Lab, which is putting employees first is good business strategy. So I would love to get your perspective on that idea. Is this our new normal, this more compassionate human-first approach? Are we experiencing a permanent shift?
I hope so. At Performance Lab and our related company, First Person, which sounds a whole lot like Purple People First, right? We have a tagline that people's strategy is business strategy. And our clients generally are people who are attracted to that way of thinking. And so I'd like to think it was headed to be a new norm for a while, but I do think the interesting influence of COVID-19 is that while capitalism has typically been very market and externally driven, and socialism more social programs, equality, and often more government driven, I do think that a lot of the influences that are social and more human centric are influencing business strategy in a different way. So, you know, most of our businesses, I suspect all of you here today are working with humans and human capital and not robots or, you know, things that are more easily swayed in that way. And putting that line of thinking first is indeed a shift for many organizations. And ultimately, even though shareholders are people, sometimes I have to remind myself of that. Sometimes their push is not so humanistic, right? Like, let's have crazy overtime this quarter to hit a number so that it sounds good at the street. And even for non-publicly traded companies, the external influences often do override things that are more internally centric. And so I'm starting to see some pretty cool things happen with our clients around those internal shifts, but I would love to hear what you all are seeing. So Meg, can you remind folks maybe how to do the raise the hand? That might be helpful if they're newer to the platform or someone on the Borshoff team.
Yes, if you click the participant icon, there should be an option in there to raise your hand.
All right, I see the box.
Yep, and it looks like we have a hand raised from Steph.
We do, yes.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for inviting me today. Hopefully most people cannot see my video because I'm a little, I'm on Central Time, so I have a little more of an excuse for my appearance, but I work for Medtronic, which is a medical device manufacturer headquartered in Ireland, but most of our we call operational headquarters are here in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And one thing that I've seen, you know, my company has always been really mission driven, and that's kind of cliche to say, but it's really true for us. But not to get right into the like nitty gritty of it, and for just the purposes of this call and keeping this kind of close, but I'm seeing some changes in how we typically would right size our business based on our financial performance. That is much more compassionate and actually extremely generous. And you know, we've done so many different programs. We did have to acknowledge our financial situation with the street recently in an 8K filing, but it was a fascinating kind of culmination of all the things that we're doing for our employees, which is typically, for me, I do struggle because I see a lot of people over, or profits over people mentality. And so it was really neat to see that we led with that as we talked to the analyst community, and you know, things like emergency pay leave, things like, and that's a 30-day program, and now it's, well, 30 days is up, now what? And so instead of, well, just use your PTO, it's, we're going to extend that. And so there's just some moves like that where, you know, we have to right size, but we're not going to be compromising our employees and their value in order to do that, which is not knocking my company, but it's definitely a different tone than I've seen historically.
That's great. It looks like Raquel has a thought as well to share. And then Pamela.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Raquel Richardson. I'm at Centric Consulting, and we have, it's almost like nothing changed at all right now for this because we were already virtual and we already had a people first thing. But when our company looked at, okay, well, how long will this really last? That's the kicker for most people, right? The uncertainty of the length of this. And so they've already put a roadmap to where they'll look at what tactics they might put in place. And the very first tactic is, everyone in the company will take a 3 to 7% pay cut, everyone across the board, to keep us all here. And that is very much the Centric way. Everyone can suffer a little versus a lot of people suffering, a few people suffering a lot. It's kind of the mentality. So they've been very transparent about it. Than they normally are. I mean, it's pretty transparent, but they leave it to the BU leads. So they would leave it to me in Indianapolis to communicate Indianapolis versus the hierarchy communicating to the whole company. But they've been doing that more during this time, which has been really nice. Everyone likes to hear from the CEO, right? And but it's at the town hall, we expected so many more questions, and there weren't any, because afterwards, when some of us made some random check-ins with other people in the company, they were like, no, that's the Centric way. I didn't expect it any other way. So it was just kind of cool to see how we're still walking the walk, even in a tough time.
Yeah, great example.
How about you,
Good
Pamela?
morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Pamela Trzeski. I work in the financial industry field. I work for First Financial Bank here in Indianapolis. We're a Midwest bank, probably about $15 billion. So we don't really compete with the Chases and Fifth Thirds and PNCs of the world. But I will say, from a people first approach, the banking industry, I believe everyone will change tremendously. Across the market, what I've seen is that most financial institutions are paying out their employees for full time off without having to use vacation or sick time. It's pandemic pay. And that was an approach that came out the very first week when all of this started. But when it comes to our customers or any customer of a bank, banks are not open right now for lobby transactions. Everything is digital. And so they're trying, I would say the financial sector is trying to figure out, how do we create an in-person experience in a digital fashion in a very quick way. There are some that have already done it and have done it okay or well. But for the smaller financial institutions, they don't have the financial capacity or the capital to invest in that very technologically advanced way to do banking. And so clients are finding out quick, some of the smaller financial institutions. It will be interesting to see the shift in paradigm of that market. It will also be interesting to see a shift from the larger banks, because those of you that are on this call that had to deal with PPP and all of the payment protection programming and EDIL loans and all of the government-backed activities that are happening, the larger institutions have had some pretty negative press, and people first approach did not come through in ways that they would have hoped or anticipated. So I think from a financial standpoint, we are going, this is the beginning of change, and I do not think that we will see ultimately what banking will look like for the next 6 to 8 months. After that, we'll really start to understand how are things going to be different for not only our employee base, what's going to be the change internally from banking. Are people going to be redirected in what they're doing? Because we don't need 5 people at a banking center that's not open to the public on a regular basis. And also for our clientele, how quick are we going to get people to move from non-digital to digital banking?
So Pamela, are you seeing a pretty decent balance in those new solution designs in terms of the employee-centric needs and the customer-centric needs? Like, is one winning over the other? Does that look much different than it would have pre-COVID?
I'm going to talk specific for my company. So First Financial has done an outstanding job taking care of who their clients are. I'm talking their employees. And when you think about, I believe that from an executive level, from an HR level, and when you talk about organizational leadership or development, this company has done it right. They have pushed through, we just went through a merger acquisition with Main Source Bank. When a bank goes through an M&A, there's always issues. There's always turmoil. It takes a long time for things to settle. So I believe that through this COVID issue, we have seen how focused this company is on the employees and the fact that they know that family and safety comes first.
Excellent.
Thanks for hosting this. This is a wonderful platform.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
How about you, Sherry?
Sorry, I need to hit unmute. So a couple of things. First, I wanted to say that, again, thank you for hosting. This is great to be able to connect with folks still as we move through all this crazy time. But at our company, it's been very interesting. So I'm Sherry Morey. I work at Covance. Covance is a subsidiary of LabCorp. LabCorp is a diagnostics company that does, and currently it was the first one that had a test out for COVID-19, approved by the FDA. And then on the drug development side, we're doing a lot of work on vaccines and other products that will help with COVID-19. In fact, we did a lot of back-end work on remdesivir, which is, I think you probably have heard something about. We have a really interesting situation in that our two companies, LabCorp Diagnostics and Covance, are very different culturally. What we've seen through this is that the efforts that have been in place to try and bring the two companies closer together were really, really slow. This virus has brought us together much faster and is creating a more cohesive culture than we had before, which is really interesting. We also have an interesting situation in that in some parts of our business, because in clinical trials, people are really more focused now on health and not going into clinical settings if they don't have to. So clinical trials, we've lost business. And so we've had to do furloughs on that side. On the other side, we have people who are in labs doing testing, not just on COVID, but on all the other diseases that we work on a regular basis. And those folks, because they're not frontline health workers, don't get the attention, the gratitude in general that other folks, on the front lines are getting. And so the other thing that I'm seeing that's really interesting from our company that's new, I mean, there have always been people who express gratitude, but we're seeing a lot more of that for our workers who are in the labs. Every message that goes out talks about pride in our people. It talks about how thankful we are for what they're doing every day. So I think it's a really interesting shift culturally for our company, bringing everyone together in a new way. I mean, there are things that we've always said, oh, we can't possibly do that suddenly we're doing now. So it's been a different experience, and I think the gratitude and the leadership leaning in more than they've ever done before is something that I hope is going to continue after this is all over. But I think it's giving us a new perspective.
Excellent. Thank you, Sherry, for those great examples. All right, Meg.
The next topic. Absolutely. So related to this, capitalism is a broad topic, right? But to get a little bit more specific towards, this group of internal communicators, I'm wondering if we can all kind of share perspectives on, so this has been on my mind since this health crisis began, and we at Borshoff do a lot of work in the employer brand space. So, and so I've been thinking about this, we've been thinking about this as it was apparent really quickly that the health crisis is going to have a dramatic impact on the economy and the job market. But so we as internal communicators have heard and used and talked about this war for talent for years, right? The economy was relatively strong up until a couple of months ago. The job market is a candidates market where people have numerous choices about where they go to work, regardless of industry. And we were seeing employers respond in kind, right? By really focusing on and investing in things like offering an exceptional employee experience, a really, really, truly differentiated culture. So my question is, I know we're talking about this turn towards compassionate decision-making and a people-first approach, but I wonder, are we seeing, or do you think we're going to experience a retreat away from, now that people are competing for jobs again, presumably instead of jobs competing for people, are we going to see a retreat away from focusing on enriching culture, focusing on an employer brand, investing in the employee experience?
Yeah, great question. I wonder if people are starting to think instead of a war, it's like thumb wrestling, right? Like there might still be some competition, but it's definitely not as severe. At the same time, I have to believe, like in my heart of hearts, that top talent will absolutely be prioritizing good cultures and employee-centric employers. And so my hope is that we don't abandon employee engagement, psychological safety, mental health, things that we're seeing positively being on the rise right now, because we get lax in our belief that the candidate pool is so large and our pipelines are so full that we don't have to compete and truly bring those values in light. Back to the social shifts in companies, I'm talking with a lot of clients right now who are seriously considering reboarding activities. Think about it like onboarding, but times, the take two, because there have been collective shifts in the value systems of these organizations through the pandemic. And what does that look like? Like maybe the core values, maybe the employee value proposition has shifted to a degree that it needs to be articulated in the types of things and the work that you all do, which is so important to tell that story. So I would like to believe it's probably going to get slightly easier, but for top talent, I think the competition is going to be there. And for those A players that you truly want to land in your organizations, you've got to tell that compelling story in a way that matches those value system shifts that I'm seeing. So that's my point of view, but I, again, would love to hear from you all.
I do wonder if this is going to, cause companies to really go back to, do we need to re-articulate our mission, vision, values, kind of that ecosystem of how values are stated and lived out. So I'm curious, is anyone seeing this or have predictions or just observations about what you've seen?
Pamela?
I'm very opinionated this morning. I'll try and not to raise my hand after every question.
No, it's great.
Ken Coleman, if whether or not you agree with his political views either, Meg, I liked the way that you put that, shared this from the 2008 downturn. There was a shift in companies that were created. So things that all of us know now: Uber, Airbnb, Slack, Pinterest, WhatsApp App Inc., Square, Venmo, Groupon. These were companies that all entered the market in 2008, and I anticipate we are going to see a shift. There will be companies that will close because they aren't investing in their people. They will leave to go to new companies. Lessonly is a good one that deals with individuals that are wanting that growth and personalized, I guess, management or support, encouragement, these things that are needed in a very difficult mindset of what we deal with every day now. If companies do not invest in their people, in the whether it's health, when we see telehealth, or areas where they can move their body every day and be encouraged to do so, if companies are not investing in their people to better themselves outside of the knowledge that you learn from their job, but book clubs, simple things, employee development programs, digital connection platforms, whatever it is, if employers do not do this, they will not make it through this change. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and you do bring up some great examples. I think Lessonly is one, and if you all haven't read Max Yoder's book, it's a really good manifesto for how to do better work and to be more people-centric. So I second that. I don't think we have any other hands raised yet, so be thinking on that lines. But I do tend to agree. I think that you'll watch a lot of people vote with their wallet, even the marketing. And I know we're talking more internal here, but the messaging that I'm starting to hear is way more about how we're taking care of our people. Nationwide's, I think it was their advertisement that's on my mind, that is focusing as much about their home accommodations and how people are working at work versus what they're doing to make it easier for a customer. So it's an interesting shift for sure. Our company is just a small example. Said, okay, this is our new norm for a bit. And so you were given wellness bucks for gym memberships that are now closed. And I've heard clients say, we were paying for parking, which you now don't need. And so it's in a way a cost that we had already budgeted. So let's shift it to what you need at home. You can now use up to $300 for gym equipment for home, or like I bought this sit to stand desk situation because I prefer to stand. And so those little things just go such a long way to tell your story in a concrete manner. Like, I care about you first, and taking care of you takes care of the customer. And so anyway, I just want to share a couple examples while we're waiting for some hands. I don't see any.
Yeah, well, so we're going to try to keep today's discussion to about 40 minutes. So we're right at the 30-hour mark, and I have one kind of final topic that I'm hoping that we can just get a lot of input on, because again, I think we all benefit from hearing from our just peers and what we're seeing and doing. And so I mean, it goes without saying, we've all had to get more creative and more flexible and more patient. We've been talking about just connecting on a way more human level. And, as we've heard, this has been an easier pivot for some industries and some organizations than others. But we have been seeing, at least on the agency side, some super innovative stuff. For example, two local organizations here in Indianapolis, the Indianapolis Indians and the Indianapolis Zoo, have really, they depend on, in-person engagement, and have truly pivoted in some really innovative and compassionate ways. We're going to share a link to a blog post if you want to read more about that in the chat. But, for this group, just kind of acknowledging those efforts on behalf of sports and entertainment organizations, those are consumer facing and external facing. But for this group, I am really interested in hearing, I'm sure we have all seen or had to implement ourselves stopgap solutions, right, for communicating with employees in this environment, or engaging with employees in this environment. What of these things do we all hope continue when we get back to normal? So, for example, I've been talking to a friend that works for an agency in Austin, and their work, as ours have, is transitioned pretty seamlessly to a remote environment, but they're going to go back to, whenever we go back to either a 1 or 2 day optional work from home protocol for employees. So it's been working well, and it reduces the carbon footprint. So I'm wondering what from this group, either a wish list or something that you really think is perhaps going to be implemented long term in your organizations, what do we all hope remains when we go back to normal?
And if you don't want to speak up live, feel free to put it in chat as well.
Oh, looks like we have a hand raised from Joe.
Hello, I'm Kelsey
hi,
from
Kelsey.
Roche Diagnostics. Part of my role at Roche is managing our Roche Gives Back program, which is our employee giving program. And a big chunk of my responsibilities is to organize our volunteer opportunities. And as you know, during this time, you can't really do in-person volunteer opportunities. So it has been a huge challenge to come up with other ways that our employees can continue to give back and feel like they're doing good during this time and making a difference. So something that we started a few weeks ago is what we call small acts of goodness. So we're actually letting our employees log volunteer time for buying groceries for a neighbor or walking a dog for a senior citizen that can't get out right now. So I think that's something that I'm hoping that we will continue even beyond the pandemic, and just offering more flexibility with our giving program.
That's a great example. I love that. Steph is commenting that they're doing something similar at Medtronic with a 2-to-1 matching giving program. I can only assume that in most cases, your leadership is more visible right now to your employee base. And I heard them mention the town halls, but holding more of those activities, I would imagine you hope those stick, but we do know the busyness often makes the executive team in particular's time really at a premium. I'm curious to know if there'll be shifts there too, for example. And I think Steph has some color commentary she wants to share.
Rebecca, you took the words out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, there's so many things that we're doing in the COVID response phase here, and there's a few things I'm ready to leave behind, which is, obviously the working like 12-hour days and every weekend, but there's a lot of really amazing things that I think this function of communications, especially employee communications, I think this is our opportunity. And I don't have a perfect answer to this question, and that I've been thinking and racking my brain, and this is what I've been thinking about as of lately too, just as we get into the long game for all of this, this is our opportunity for internal comms like no other before. I think we have been elevated. The old days of internal comms, just they do the billboards and they do the newsletters and then that perspective and reputation of our function is absolutely a thing of the past. And I think we've been catapulted to the a lot of us always, especially if you've been in an agency, and Meg and I worked in an agency together for like a decade. And a lot of what we would do is, we need to make sure that we can sell the value of what we do to our executive team. And it's selling itself right now. I mean, the ability for us to be agile and be able to engage our workforce in a way that is so visible is really, really incredible. And so what do we do with that is like the question of the day and the question of this time for those of us leading internal communications. And so I'd love a whole like hour brainstorm on that with the brilliant people on this line, because it's an opportunity to seize and remain kind of at the forefront of our executives' minds to say, this is a value function that isn't a support function. They are a their strategic value drivers, and how do we continue to sell that into them for the long haul. But Rebecca, as you're mentioning executives, that's the other key thing, is they're very visible right now. We just went through a CEO transition, which, if anyone's been through that, is super fun, especially during a pandemic. But we have a new CEO that, again, what do we do with that opportunity to keep him really visible, and to make sure that his commitment to communicating to employees remains, intact, and isn't just a pandemic opportunity, but an internal communications opportunity. So thinking through a lot of that, but don't have a perfect answer, because I think this is the question probably on most of our minds, and why the team might be a little quiet, because that's the $1 million question right now.
Yeah, you bring up great points, though. Clearly, you all have deserved a seat at the table for a long time. Now you're at the head in many ways, right, of directing and advising on what goes forward. And it's important that we not lose traction on that. And it's important that the leadership does not become less visible because business returns more as usual. That would definitely send the wrong message in many cases. I think Catherine's got a comment here, and probably will be wrapping us up.
Sure. Thanks, Rebecca. I'm so glad you were able to join us today. So I listened to a webinar just yesterday, as a matter of fact, from a group out of the UK, and they were talking about some of the trends. They did a really quick survey recently of internal communicators across the globe, and some of the things that they found I thought would be relevant to this conversation about trends. They were talking, of course, about a lot of internal communicators are either thankful that they have such great digital channels in place, or they're saying they're definitely going to make more of an investment in digital channels when this is all over with. So of course, that's one thing. I think, for us at Borshoff, I'm just so fortunate. I'm so glad that we put in place Microsoft Teams and really got the team up to date on that a year or so ago, because that has just been a lifesaver for us to stay connected. And one of the things that we saw since this whole thing has happened is that our engagement has actually been even higher in, for example, our monthly staff meetings. Because we're doing them on Teams, we're seeing each other and we're having our presentations and our interactions, but you should see the chat box. It's going crazy with people throwing things in. And these are people who, sometimes sit through a whole staff meeting and never say a word. So you wonder, are they engaged? Are they tracking with us? That sort of thing. And yet here we are in this different environment, and literally everyone is making comments left and right. And it just goes to show that when you change up the environment, you actually see that even though someone may have been very quiet, doesn't mean that they weren't engaged. It just means that now they're coming out and they're using a different channel or a different tool because it's a different opportunity. So I thought that was really interesting. And then just in terms of the other things that they found in the study, they were talking a lot about the fact that well-being has really shot to the top of the list in terms of subjects that they want to, not only are they focusing more on now, but they also want to keep at the top of the list going forward, and really paying more attention to and messaging on well-being, whether that's mental, physical, social connection. All of those things are becoming much more important to internal communicators. And then just one other thing that they mentioned was that line managers, many of the people who were surveyed said that they were already working to try to better equip line managers, but that was something that they never really could get a lot of traction for, even though, as Steph mentioned earlier, people want to hear from their director and from the people on the ground. We all want to hear from the CEO too, of course, but there's just something different about the communications we get from our direct supervisor. And that in this survey that they did, the people who were surveyed said they really want to make that a much higher priority in equipping those people beyond just sending them talking points, sending them a generic toolkit for major announcements, but really doing more to train them and equip them in ways that can be more lasting and sustainable for them.
Excellent. Thank you, Catherine. Great points. Appreciate that.
I love all of this discussion, and thank you. And I'm sure we could go on for another hour. So thank you, Steph, for volunteering to lead that next session for us. So we'll be in touch about that brainstorm. But again, we're just going to try to keep it to a few more minutes. Thank you, everybody, for the discussion today. Like I said in the beginning, we will be sharing a recorded version of this in a chat transcript if people are interested in the replay. And today's kind of session is part of a broader plan for Borshoff to share more things virtually, right? Talking about pivoting and opportunity. And we are going to be hosting a series of similar discussions called Shoff Chats. So topics for these chats are not only going to span stuff that is relevant to us as internal communicators and this group, but advertising, brand development, the creative process, crisis comms, traditional public relations, etc., and in an informal format like this, intended to help us as peers and as professionals kind of network and connect and learn in a casual setting. So please be on the lookout for Shoff Chats. We would love to have this group join in on some of those future discussions. But I have to say, we do look forward to convening our IC coffee chats in person in our Borshoff space just as soon as we can safely and responsibly do so. So we miss you guys, and just thank you again. And we will continue this conversation in a future session.
Excellent. And I just want to make an offer. We have a return to work kit that we've been working on. So I'll share that out to the Borshoff team, and they can share it all out to you all. But being in a firm that a management consultancy that deals with a lot of HR, there are lots of interesting topics around furlough and recalling people and safety and security and all of that. So happy to provide some thought starters on that. And appreciate being invited to this inaugural virtual chat. Thank you guys so much.
That's excellent, Rebecca. Thank you for providing those materials. All right, everyone, have an excellent day and stay safe and healthy.